Ooh, we have two Brents. Wonder where that is.
I saw that. Thought it was odd.
It's Google. There, went away.
Are they left over from the picnic? Oh yeah, go ahead. We've been using them with the youth, so. Can we get those dessert things that are in there? Keep working them out. All right. Thanks.
So we'll get started here in a little bit. I think we got a couple folks that maybe just watching or something going on there too. Don't know. Gene said he would show up. I haven't seen him yet. So do this. Why don't we? There's Gene. I just took your name in vain and you showed up.
Well, that's the way it works.
It is.
I heard you.
What was that?
I heard you. How is everybody?
All right. All right. Why don't we just? It's just a little after 10 now, so we'll just rip through maybe reading the selected text. If somebody would like to do that, and then we'll all be on the same page there. Do we have any volunteers? Just like confirmation class. All right, I'll do it. Just like confirmation class. All right. Then Moses went up to God. The Lord called him from the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the Israelites, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you obey my voice, and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession out of all the peoples. Indeed, the whole earth is mine, but you shall be for me a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the Israelites." So Moses came, summoned the elders of the people, and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. Then the Lord God spoke all these words: "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day, and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a day of Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord had made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. There, I did all the talking. It's your turn. So where are we going with this?
You're preaching this one, Glesney. You tell me.
That's why I'm here. Let me look 1 second. Thing.
Well,
This is
what I
between-
think is interesting.
Hmm?
What I think is interesting is sort of this is a 3-week run of these covenants going into next week with the Joshua reading, which I'm doing. That is the whole "fear not, stand firm" kind of thing that runs through all of it, right? This whole God is the actor in salvation business that drives through that entire arc. Where, right? I mean, Moses says, "Fear not, stand firm," before they do the whole Red Sea parting thing, and then this week, you saw what I did and how I brought you out, and Joshua does about the same thing next week. So I find that interesting. I don't know where to go with it.
Well, I think one of the things is, we're kind of tying up our stewardship stuff, and we're kind of focusing on the blessings of the promise. And one of the things that comes along with the Ten Commandments and rules with folks very often is they tend to see things that restrict their freedom rather than it is something that is a blessing that actually enables their freedom. And that's kind of where I'm kind of headed off with this in this particular direction. And going back to that freedom is granted by, and I touched on it just a little bit last week, and I didn't get any static. I thought I might, I might get a little static for it, and I didn't. But one of the things was I mentioned the fact that freedom is never anything that you earn for yourself. It's always something that is given to you, in some ways. And I'm not so sure if I stand on a real solid ground with that, but I think there is something to that thought. Is the freedom that we have has been given to us now. As we continue to work through that, if you look at the freedom we have as a country, that was not something I earned for myself. The freedom I have as a Christian, I did not earn for myself. Those are all blessings.
Well, and from a biblical standpoint, we're never really given the option of having true freedom and being free from absolutely everything. We are slaves of either one master or another, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's which master determines the kind of freedom we end up having. I'm curious, did any of you guys preach on this summer? It was the first of the 3 suggested 4-week series.
We did.
I did.
Okay, because we're also like David just mentioned, we're doing stewardship right now, and so I'm going to be picking up on some of what I used this past summer. When I set this up during the first 2 weeks of our 4-week series, I talked about the fact that in the Jewish and Hebrew tradition, these are referred to as commandments. It's the 10 words or the 10 promises, and doing some of the same moves that David talked about in terms of them being about how do we live in community? These are instructions for how to love the Lord our God and to love our neighbors as ourselves. And the extent to which they function as intended really comes down to us covenanting to do them, which we promise to others, and others promising to us. And the primary example I used was when I was a camp counselor. Every one of my cabins, we sat down the first night and we made our own cabin covenant. And it worked as long as we promised to treat everyone else that way, and we knew everyone else was promising to treat us that way.
What is a good way to, you had mentioned before about, obviously the commandments are not restrictions, but rather blessings, what's a good way to remind people of that? Because obviously we generally would look at it as, I guess the first response would be as a restriction.
Yeah, my Old Testament, one of my Old Testament profs in seminary, Ralph Pine, he always talked about how the law writ large and the Decalogue writ small function as a playpen. That was what he always said, right? The playpen, if you look at it, is a baby cage, right? But inside of it, the baby is safe from all the sharp corners and crap that are around the house, and it can hang out in the playpen and be happy, which is sort of the way, right? Because these are boundaries. They're all knots. You know, and Luther defines them all positively in the Small Catechism for us Lutherans. We think about ways that we should act, but in a very real way. I mean, there's still restrictions here, but again, like Gene said, they're meant to keep us, you know, from hurting each other. They're meant to protect us, and they work when we all agree to abide by them. And I think, Gene, you are muted. I don't know if you want to be muted. There you go.
It does that to me when I start typing.
Ah, lovely.
For you, probably it is, yes. To piggyback on that, one of the things that I have heard is that Jesus may not have been literally a carpenter, but that that was one of the slang terms, I guess I'll say, for rabbis at the time, because the way the rabbis used the law was like in your illustration. They used it to create a safe place in which people could live and flourish and all of that. And so they were carpenters, not in a literal nails and wood sense, but carpenters in a societal sense, in the way that they used the law to do that.
I think I'm just double checking on. We do a little blessing basket each week that has that theme, and kind of ask some questions with folks too. You know, and just talking about, you know, maybe going on a different tangent with this. I don't know. I've been slightly distracted this morning. But what family rules did you have that turned out to be real blessings? You know, where does it become a blessing? Where does it become a curse when you have those rules? Where does that bring life? You know, going back to that again, and that idea of keeping that promise. You know, for me, going back to this and saying, I'm not always good on those promises, and that putting that back in God's court again. I mean, kind of bouncing back to where Don was at, you know, with this larger sweep, saying, you know, the heavy lifting here is done by God. We have a hard time keeping all of these, much less one of them. You know?
Can I just pick which one I keep today?
Sure.
On to a different one next week?
Yeah, which is probably a really good reason why I'm not your God. One of several.
I'm not sure where I pulled this from, but one of the things I used this past summer was you shall have no other gods before me, taken out of context, sounds like a command, but then had some examples of other statements from the Bible that are grammatically the same. Mm-hmm. You shall not die. You shall not lack anything. You shall not be afraid. You know, to what extent are these commands, and to what extent are are these descriptions and promises that God makes, because God said the whole earth is mine, but you are going to be different. You're my people.
You're my peeps.
And so, to what extent is this descriptive rather than prescriptive, promise rather than command?
Well, and I think that brings a point of how do we. People are going to hear these as commands. People are going to hear these flat out as rules. I mean, I did, very often. And how do you open this up to the sense that it is a promise of blessing, that it is not necessarily this command thing of a prescriptive, but as a descriptive sort of thing? What
if you say them that way, like in preaching, right? And then said the Lord, you're going to have no other gods. You're not going to take the name of the Lord in vain. These are the things that you will do, and just say it that way.
Right.
I mean, which technically, grammatically, shall not is the same as not going to, but people don't understand that. Right? I mean, as Gene was saying, they are prescriptive. Descriptive, not prescriptive. But if you just say them that way, say them in a descriptive sense as part of it, like I feel like, did that sound different? That's because it is, and just to open that door then to that, man, I think it's a possibility. It's something I might try if I was doing it.
One of the ways I got at that in the first week of our series this past summer was talking about just wait until your father gets home.
Mm-hmm.
And how we hear things, it depends a lot on how we set them up. And to what extent have we set up God to be the bad guy in the way that we've used these? God starts with, look, I'm the guy who got you out of Egypt, remember? I'm the good guy here. I'm the one who's given you all of this, and I've done it because you are special to me. And let me remind you who you are. The same thing. The same words can be heard very differently. When my kids are wondering why I'm being so nice to them, and they ask me, I might say, "Well, I'm your father. It's what I do because I'm your dad and I love you." It sounds really different than when Darth Vader delivered that line. But it's the same words.
Yep.
But in one case it's a description and a promise, and in the other it's a threat or worse.
I was looking just a little bit earlier before our talk and was looking for something to do as an activity on Wednesday night about the Ten Commandments in preparation for Sunday. And one of the activities, which I kind of discounted at the time, but we just mentioned it again here, was turning the commandments into positive statements rather than hearing them as rules. And so I may actually try that to go back to what you all were just saying and turning them into positive statements. Because as you said, how you set up the statement bears a lot on the response. And so I wonder if the response of the reader would be different if it was set in a positive way. Because I think, I don't do very well at this, but they say when you're talking to your children, you should use not, please don't run into the street. That way you don't get run over. You would say, I like it when you make good choices about, I don't know, walking on the sidewalk or whatever it is, changing it into positives.
Oh, when I worked as a lifeguard, you never told kids, don't run. You always say, walk, please.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the one other thing too that kind of comes from this whole even inverting it into the positive statement is why do we have that negative light on it? And I think in some levels, and I don't know what the American Baptists do, but the Lutherans got the, we list up our, the Ten Commandments in a certain way. The rest of humanity goes in a certain other direction, I guess. But we've listified them. We've codified it as this list of things that check off list, rather than when you're reading this, it's actually a quite nice little flow to that narrative, saying, because it does remind you that I'm the Lord your God that brought you out of the land of Egypt. You shall have no other gods. Oh yeah, that's right. You're the one that does good things for us. And when you're telling us these things, it's not this. It's like, and this will go well, and this will go well, and honor your father and mother, for your life will go well for you in the land that the Lord your God is giving to you. I mean, there's a very positive side of that thing when you read it as a flow rather than as this list of, like, okay, I got 1, I got 2, I got 3, I got 4. I don't know. To me, that just made a lot of sense. The whole flow of that in the reading of the text is much more than a list.
Yeah, just as you were starting to talk, my thought was, to what extent is our problem the fact that we don't really get that statement where God starts, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. I am the one who freed you. I am the one who has blessed you. And do we jump ahead too quickly and deal with these 10 words before understanding the context? And is that why we continue to have such a difficult time with them?
Well, if you're not in a relationship, if you don't have that good relationship to start with, somebody can come up with the best things in time. I mean, you get pulled over by a police officer for speeding. You're not in a good relationship. He's giving you a ticket for violating the law. You don't like that. You get pulled over by a friend of yours who's a cop who gives you a warning and says, you know what, I'm looking out for you. And if you do this again, I'm going to have to give you a ticket. And this is why, because I want you to live, because you're my friend.
Right. Yeah, to what extent is our reaction, you're not the boss of me.
Right.
Don't tell me not to whiz on the electric fence. I'll do what I want. I'm going to go whiz on the electric fence. Right?
That I would pay cash money to see.
But even, even sometimes obviously good ideas, good rules, how we react. Again, it comes down to that context and who's telling us. Yeah. And so if we don't have that kind of relationship with our God in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to how do we experience God, right? And I mean, I think so often, I'm going to harp on it again, David, get used to it, that we experience God in Genesis 1, right? Genesis 1 is how we think about God when we think about God. God did this and this and this and this and this, and look how great it all is. God is awesome. And then when we show up, everything is cool when you're part of a team, but then we show up and screw up the team, right? God has done all of this great stuff, and look how amazing God is, and here's us, this bunch of screw-ups, and there's God, and we could never possibly be close to God because we screwed up and got kicked out, and that's who we are. Rather than experiencing God in Jesus Christ as a redemptive figure, I mean, that's why I love this narrative lectionary cycle starting with the flood. Like, you immediately experience God as Redeemer. You immediately experience God as Savior, which is how these people are experiencing God when he says, I am the Lord your God who brought you up from the land of Egypt out of the house of slavery. When you've got that experience that God is the one who saved your bacon rather than God is the one you have to appease, I think you hear them differently.
No bacon.
Bacon. Yeah, once in a while I end up in a position where I need to discipline other people's children, and I'm aware that I have to be careful about that, partly because they're other people's children, but partly because they don't know me as well as my own children.
Mm-hmm.
and so the possibility that they overreact to being told they're doing something wrong is much more likely. And I'm thinking about the difference between that and the experience when I have had to discipline my own children and had experiences where, so I'm the bad guy because I'm just told them they have to stop doing what they're doing, right? And they
Get off my lawn!
And when some of my kids are little enough that can still cause tears and then who do they run to for comfort? Me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think says a lot about that relationship. Thank you, David.
That was scary and terrible.
Well, I didn't think it was going to make quite that kerfuffle, so I won't do that any longer.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Nice shot at Gene. That's.
Thank you. Oh my
Fine,
goodness.
I'll make it go away if I can. I'm trying. Oh well, it's not going away. You'll have to cope. So,
Anyway.
Is that what you see, or do you see other stuff? What?
Stuff where?
Okay, never mind. Again, you go back to that relational stuff too, and I think that's then why do we make, you could follow Dom's thing a little bit, which I struggle a little bit with. I don't see quite the we're poo because we screwed it all up kind of stuff, but
You just
I know it's there.
It's more self-loathing in your life, and you really
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to have a halfway decent sense of self-esteem. I'm really apologetic for this. But why is it, again, why is it that we do have that sense of if God in fact wants this relationship, if God in fact is, I am the Lord your God, who is the one who has done all these great things for you and who wants to continue still to bless you, why do we, for lack of a better word, demonize him? Why do we make him the bad guy?
I mean, that's a very similar take to what I was saying.
Yeah.
You can learn. See, that's because we have a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? We're chiding each other like this.
Yes. Well, yeah, you give somebody crap you don't know, you're itching for a conflict. But you have a relationship where you can give each other the beans, or you say, you know what, I mean, who are you going to say you're going to take more seriously if somebody warns you, and this is one of the struggles with life stuff, somebody warns you that the bridge is out, well, yeah, you probably pay attention to that. Somebody says, I don't know, I'm stretching.
Yeah.
Just opening up another.
One of the things that I did yesterday was I just put a question out on my own Facebook page and on the church's Facebook page, asking folks to respond to a survey on which of the 10 Commandments they have the most trouble personally struggle with the most. And so I'll probably try to focus on the ones that they indicate, which so far it looks like keeping the Sabbath day holy and not coveting your neighbor's stuff.
There are also some of the safer ones. I mean, if I'm going to cop,
right? No one's going to sit there and go, "I have trouble with not committing adultery."
Or thou shalt not
murdering.
Murder.
That really cramps my style.
Yeah.
On a regular basis.
Yeah, I can't believe that no one would, even though I say it's confidential and that there's no, their email address is not linked to the survey results, I can't believe someone would not put in, thou shalt not murder as a struggle.
Yes. Depending on how well they read into the intent of the commandment, though.
Right. Mine was always coveting my neighbor's ox. That's always the most difficult for me.
Coveting my neighbor's ass, but that's a whole nother.
Yeah, that's difficult.
Because never mind.
You could say that now. It's after 2009.
It was a sheep.
That's bad, Gene.
Well, it makes a distinction between neighbor's wife and neighbor's ass.
It does.
Neighbor's
It does.
wife.
Thank goodness for Luther's numbering of the commandments.
Yes. Maybe the most important.
I just popped this up because we kind of go straight to the commandments. Those are the things we kind of know the best a little bit too.
Yeah.
But there is that sense of the delivery again, going back to this idea of Redeemer. And what is it? And everybody's favorite hymn is, Eagle's Wings and all that kind of good stuff. And you have this kind of reference to that. There's actually somebody, I think, on the narrative page that said they were going to do an acoustic version of Steve Miller's "Fly Like an Eagle." And that's exactly right. Tweak the lyrics a little bit. But what does that mean? How does that carry? Boom, 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 boom. And again, this goes back to the God's doing the heavy lifting, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. We didn't wander there by ourselves. We didn't go there under our direction. We have been delivered into God's presence. Or He comes
Yes.
to us.
It's God doing it and doing it in a way that we could not. And I like the fact that because it's eagle's wings, it implies a height distance similar to the Tower of Babel, where God has to stoop down to see what these people are up to as they're building this tower that's supposedly going to reach heaven. I like that aspect of the comparison here, but it's also it's about that direction that you did not choose me, but I chose you.
Mm-hmm.
Which will play off, I think, very interesting again. It'll be interesting to see where next week goes, because we do have but as far as me and my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not in my house.
Yes, my house.
You might be good, but I'm the best in my house. How long is your guys' stewardship thing going?
Yes, David. How long is it going?
That's a really good question, because there were 2 dates on the materials I put together, which happened before my sabbatical, so it got a little confused. So technically, we're bringing the focus of the first. We're spreading out the kind of consecration Sunday idea a little bit. So we're also having our Harvest Fest this weekend. So this will be the first in-gathering of pledges and that kind of stuff, and the next week we'll be tying it up a little bit. So it's a total of 5 weeks.
Ending ultimately next week,
Yes.
but in some sense with the apex being this week.
Yeah.
Gotcha. This
Just
week is
because there's so much
number
going
3-5 for us, so we would be we're gonna finish up with Gratitude Sunday on the 19th. So I had to replace David and Bathsheba. So I'm not asking people
Talk
to.
about coveting your neighbor's
I'm not
ass.
asking people to make financial commitments and preaching on that one.
Nope, got nothing.
Yep.
So what did you replace it with?
Deuteronomy 26, the wandering Aramean text.
Oh, okay, yeah.
My forefather was a drunken Aramean.
Yes. Which could be worse.
Could be. Um, so it seems like we all agree on the general premise that what this ultimately comes down to is what God has done for us, and then this being both about more that God promises us as well as God's preferred reaction from us, but that what God expects of us is actually for our own good. Is that all generally true?
Yeah.
And the question is how to help them see that. Just like I'm convinced that 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 good stewardship, generous giving, financial and otherwise, really primarily comes down to the need of the giver to give. It's certainly not about God needing the money.
Mm-hmm.
To some secondary extent, it's about congregations needing money to operate in this world. But primarily it's our need to give that it's about, that it's a faith practice, a discipleship issue, which to me is the stewardship connection to these commandments, is that they operate the same way. The expectation to give is also a promise that you will actually be happier, healthier, closer to God by doing things the way that God and Jesus have told you to do it. That this actually works. That if you trust this and do it, life becomes more abundant.
Okay. There's a sentence in that first chunk of the text there where it goes into, indeed the whole earth is mine, and that I'm doing this because I want you to be a treasured people. That this is something that is given unto you, and to do this to be a God treasured possession of God puts us in a certain relationship. I'm just trying to read off a little bit of this commentary here too. It says here, but it is worth dwelling on, since, not if, the whole earth is mine, the people of God have a proper perspective on being a treasured possession, and this in two ways. First, while they may be a treasured possession, they are not the only possession. God is bigger than God's people. And second, if God's people fail to be or become God's treasured possession, if they fail in passing the if clause, then God has other possessions that perhaps might do the job. I don't know what to do with that.
You are replaceable.
Yes. How that works.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a sense you could read this as, like a coach telling an elite athlete or a promising athlete, look, I'm going to make you a champion.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's how we do it. You're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. But it all flows out of that initial promise.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess again brings me back to, do we understand and have the relationship with this God in the first place that makes the rest of this possible? Because if you go, well, this guy's crazy, he doesn't know what he's talking about, then you're not going to put in that effort to try to be a champion because you're not going to believe they're really going to get you there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So here's an idea.
Okay.
I saw a request on Facebook earlier this morning from a friend, Bob Freezy,
Yeah.
about his computer and his printer not communicating. And one of my thoughts was to respond with, "Well, Bob, did you read the instructions?" You know, especially us guys, right?
Actually, that's perfect.
How many of us have tried and tried and tried to do it our way and to figure it out and to make it work, and as a last resort, we
Read the manual.
Instructions.
and that's what these are, right? These are the instructions. If you do it this way, it works,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
You do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. Don't plug it in first before you load the software. Load the software first, otherwise you screw it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, how many of us are still trying our own things, and we haven't gotten to a point where we're frustrated enough to just, fine, I'll read the instructions.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, how many of us have read the instructions and go, oh, and we don't finish reading the instructions. We think, okay, now I know enough.
That's usually where I find myself. That's it.
And then a couple hours later, we're like, I really thought that would work.
Yes.
I guess I'll call a professional now.
That was one of the other activities, going back to what you just talked about. You remember that old thing where you give folks a sheet of paper and it's got like 20 instructions on it, and then at the end it says go back to the beginning because you were supposed to stop at like number 2. So that,
Yeah, like number 1 says, read everything before doing anything. And then number 2 is put your name at the top. And then number
exactly.
3, and you're writing all over the sheet of paper, right? And you get to the bottom that says, now go back and do only 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, that's a good one.
You guys got a Dremel?
I do.
Somewhere.
You ever disregarded the instructions for that thing?
Have I ever read the instructions for that thing? Probably not. Why?
I was trying to use it. What I really needed was like a band saw. So I was trying to cut out a piece of wood. Like I needed like a jigsaw. Really, but I thought I've got a Dremel. It's got the right attachment to do that kind of work. But I actually read the instructions. One of the things is you always cut in a certain direction because of the rotation of the thing, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, so I'm going around and I'm going around and I'm within like a quarter inch or less of the end, and it keeps getting hung up. And so I'm like, no, forget it. I can do that much backwards. And what happens?
Whee!
Take a chunk out of my thumb. I still have not finished cutting the thing out. That was going to be for Christmas. These things are for our own good, right? These rules are for our own good.
Yeah. There's one other thing I was looking for. So do you guys all use the clergy stuff?
Yeah. Although I changed the one line of the confession after last week.
We use the confession out of the book.
It's gotten a little bit better. Last year in particular, there was some of the stuff where it was just a little too foo-foo for me, as it were.
A little too foo-foo?
Foo-foo. Every once in a while, just
How are you all doing the scripture reading? Like last week, we, in lieu of having just one person read it, we actually broke it down. We did not the skit, but the
dramatic reading.
The dramatic reading, and that seemed to go well because the readings are generally pretty long.
We've tended just to read, encourage them to open up their Bibles and read along, but we tended to do that.
We don't do that.
Is sometimes kind of a drag depending on who's reading.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the good ones are really good.
That reminds me, I need to look ahead because we've got our 5th and 6th graders use actually the Bible portion of our confirmation curriculum from Faith Incubators, and they almost always include skits to go along with stuff, and the kids really love doing those things. The teachers will just hand them out at the beginning, and with minimum props, they'll act out this stuff and love it. I need to look ahead and see if find one for them to work up to and do in worship to go along with the narrative lectionary, since they include that.
Good. All right. Yeah, I think and this week they do have the skit. This one they don't have a dramatic reading or for that one. It's a little different. I don't know if that would fly so much. I don't know. I got if you have a good reader, that's great. If you don't, maybe not so much, but.
What does it say theologically that in the dramatic reading of the text is a narrator and then there's a Lord 1 and a Lord 2?
I was just looking at that.
Does that go along with we will create humankind in our image? I don't know.
Then you should probably have a Lord 3 in there just to make sure you're covering your Trinitarian bases.
Yeah, where's Lord 3? Why isn't this Trinitarian?
I'd be willing to kind of hang out with that one a little bit, but only 2.
I don't know.
I'm going to need to step out. I've taken a few of your great ideas down and plan to claim them as my own. So appreciate y'all's help.
And we appreciate that as well. Have a fabulous day. We'll be back next week.
We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Take it easy. So did he just admit the commandment he has trouble with is thou shalt not steal?
I think he did. Or covet anyway. I don't know.
No, it sounds like he's going to actually use them.
Just straight out steal? Okay. That works too. There we go. Alrighty. Yeah, we have a couple folks. So Dom's taking off there, and Hoyt, if you want to join in one of these days, I see you've been muted and just kind of muted, and hanging out there. You can do that. And Ronaldo is watching us on the Skype. So if you'd ever like to join us, you can go to the Narrative Lectionary page, join us there, and there's usually a link, and we can kind of go from there. So does that work on the Facebooks? I think I got enough. Even like I said, there's some stuff with stewardship in there. We're also having our big Harvest Fest in there, so I got some stuff to work with and draw in there, and it's all good.
Sounds good.
So.
Well, thank you again for getting us together.
Yeah, well, at least it worked this week for the most part. We had the biggest bunch ever, and maybe next week we'll get a couple more to join us.
All right.
All right. Take care, Gene.